What's up, guys? It is Infinity on Hannah. I'm actually the brand new co-host for Not a Podcast.
You better be okay with it.
John's actually really sick right now and unable to do this intro. He was in the ER recently and he's just trying to recover from his illness, but he does apologize for the lack of content over the next few days, and he really does appreciate all the support that he's been getting on Patreon and even all the well wishes on Twitter. Thank you guys so much. Like I said, I am going to be John's co-host for Not a Podcast. We're going to try and put out episodes once or twice a month, hopefully, depending on our schedules, but we do have some great ideas and even special guests lined up for you guys, so please stay tuned. Each of these episodes is also going to be uploaded to SoundCloud for those of you who do prefer to just listen. Now make sure you guys check out the link below to Patreon if you want to support John. He would hugely appreciate it. It really does help him out a lot. And while you're down there, maybe check out my channel if you wanna. Anyways, guys, let's get on with this episode of Not a Podcast.
Alright, so now that we're finally into the podcast, we've got one big topic up for today. And the main thing is an epidemic that's kind of been sweeping the nation, or the nations, I suppose. It's really kind of become a widespread issue, I feel like. I don't know what you're feeling like, but what do you think about all of these rock, alternative, and pop rock bands that just seem to be like going for a very poppy style?
It's getting old at this point because a lot of these bands have been, favorites of ours and a lot of people, and I feel like they always try to, change directions, which is fine. Bands can change directions, but
there's a difference between
hitting the mark. There's
a difference between evolving and devolving.
That's what it seems like is going on here.
I feel like a lot of these bands are progressing backwards, and that's kind of an oxymoron right there, because there's not really progression with these songs or else albums that seem to be coming out. So what are some of the bands that you would say were affected by this? At least in terms of, we've just kind of been hit over the head with it in the early 2017 months so far. What are you seeing?
Definitely All Time Low is a good example of recent, their latest single was not impressive to me whatsoever or memorable, and it wasn't big enough, at least in my opinion, for a lead single, and it just wasn't rock enough. Where are the guitars? What?
It was kind of like one of those things where I understand whenever bands take new directions, but at the same time, I always feel like the band should be involved if you are a band. You know what I mean? Like you said, if
every member of the band plays an instrument, yet we're hearing nothing but
it's just like a
fake
program,
drums.
Yeah, programmed drum track that could easily. But where's Ryan on
Somebody
that for All Time Low?
Somebody could press a button and do that. It's just, I don't know. It's like they're taking the easy route.
Right.
And they act like they're, like you said, evolving and doing something bigger and so much better. And it's like the complete opposite. When you look at these bands, not even just All Time Low, but there's other examples, their entire discographies, their best stuff was years and years ago. And it's they act like what they're putting out now is the best they've ever done.
Right. And I think that gets into a little bit too of the whole marketing aspect, which we're going to get into. But some of these bands just flat out will come out and say, this is our best record. And then a year after it came out, they'll backtrack on it, and say, oh, we really were feeling pressured by this.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel like that builds a genuine connection between the fans and the
Oh,
listener.
yeah, because they're not being genuine.
Yeah.
And I think that's another problem that goes along with, the labels' involvement. If bands have to put out a record every so many years, and if they're not really feeling it, which I can understand, having to do that every so often. And then All Time Low actually switched labels,
right,
which was kind of a shock to me because I thought they were pretty happy at Hopeless.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things where even if your contract expires, it still seems like they were really succeeding there. Their last album, Future Hearts, was their biggest album that they had ever had.
Insane.
I don't know if it was one of the things where they were like, well, we want to just expand our fan base even further, and we feel like Fueled by Ramen can do that for us, but that kind of gets into the whole problem of the Fueled by Ramen mentality.
Yeah, I was gonna say one thing about Fueled by Ramen. When I think of bands like All Time Low, I think of their pop punk stuff, Nothing Personal and all that. And most of the stuff on Fueled by Ramen, I feel is more poppy, or else, it's not mainstream, but more.
It's like a watered down alternative, I would say. A watered down, the guitars are never as loud on that label.
Right.
I feel like just look at Basement, who recently signed to Fueled by Ramen.
That was another one that I was shocked at, because when you look at those bands, I just feel like they don't really fit the lineup on that label.
Well, I was already disappointed by the first track. I know the deluxe edition of Promise Everything Is Out. I have no desire to listen to it because I heard the re-recorded version of the title track, and it already sounded like a watered-down version of what they were doing.
And that's, like, so hard to, like, accept because they are, you know, an upcoming band that has a lot of talent, and their album was so fucking good.
Yeah, Aquasun, easily one of the best songs of 2016.
I've heard it in a long time, too, but, like, I was just kind of... I don't know, like, disappointed in a way that they signed to Fueled by Robin, because I just can't see them, I don't know, progressing in the same direction that they, you know, seem to be going in from on.
And I feel like Fueled by leaves some of their older talents alone, you know?
Yeah, because they've been there for so long.
Like Paramore, for example, you know?
Let them do what they want.
Exactly,
basically.
And we just caught wind of the new track listing for their record, and we were looking at the songwriters and everything for it, for the songs that they registered to the database, and they're not being forced to work with outside co-writers. They're doing it within the band.
That's refreshing.
I'm excited, and the track listing looks great. And Panic at the Disco, say what you will about their last album, I wasn't even a big fan of it whatsoever, but at least I don't feel like Brendan Urie was forced to do those things.
He's definitely doing what he wants, I think, and he is the only actual member, so I don't think anybody's coming in and stepping their foot down on him at this point in his career.
Right. I just feel like a lot of those bands are kind of bogged down because a lot of those also associate and get tied in with DCD2, which is Pete Wentz's label, and Pete Wentz, obviously with Fall Out Boy, was originally on Fueled by Ramen. They are now kind of alumni in that sense. And now a lot of those bands will have joint record labels, you know, like Fall Out Boy, I believe, are signed to obviously Island and DCD2. And I think Panic are on DCD2 and Fueled by. A lot of them are. And it seems like Fueled by is kind of copying what DCD2 and obviously Crush is doing. It's the same group
of people, it seems like. And also I wanted to mention before, I forgot to say that another band that was signed to them recently is Swimmers. That's another one that I really hope doesn't change directions.
I think Swimmers are in a unique position just because they already have kind of a pop sensibility to them, and they're already doing stuff that's a little bit weirder than most alternative bands. They were never straight. I mean, before they even signed to a label at all, I think that's when they put out that track Miley, which is a very weird song, and stuff like Hannah, and I mean, they go from that to Do You Have a Car? They do a lot of stuff with their sound. And then we hear Palm Trees, which was on the deluxe edition, and Lose It, which were both really great songs.
Really great.
So I don't really have much fear for them. I have a fear for the rock bands, I would say, more so that come in. I think a lot of times maybe they're scouting for stuff that's already kind of poppy, and they're like, oh, your sound fits perfectly. Oh, and if your sound doesn't fit with us, then let's maybe tweak a few things, and let's re-record that, or let's try that again, or something like that. So, getting back to the whole DCD2 thing I was talking about, I think this is a deeper issue, maybe even a problems I have with type video that I could work on in the future, just because there are a lot of different things that tie into them. Crush Management that does a lot of the promotion for artists on these labels. Yes, very cancerous. And you see longtime bands like Fall Out Boy affected by this. Even Weezer, who have been in the game for a long time, now they're promoted by Crush Management and the whole DCD2 thing. And it's just like they run their Twitter accounts and social medias, Instagrams and everything to be like relatable. And it's like they're so desperate with not only the pop music necessarily that they're putting in at this time, but they try to make these songs just somehow stick with the youth. And they will do anything. They will use any emoji, anything that they can put in.
They're like dumbing down a lot of stuff, I feel like, to cater to those younger people, because that's like the majority of people that are looking through Twitter, I feel like, are a lot younger. So they're trying to grab those people in, but I just think it's like the wrong way to go about it, like, because all their older fans, I know, are just gonna get so annoyed at it. We're one of them, you know?
Right, exactly.
Some of them.
And we're not even that old. It's just the sense that
it's just like enough is enough. Like, you don't have to put 80 emojis in every tweet.
Exactly, and I don't need to know like 80 times that New Politics have a song on sale for 69 cents. And speaking of New Politics, who are also on DCD2, did you see Pete Wentz's tweet?
Yes,
about
I replied to it.
Oh God, what did you say?
He like, I forget how he worded it, but he said like, this is
groundbreaking or something like that.
Yeah, something really great. And I was like, it's really not, Pete. And he always does that with any band that's connected to them, like to Fall Out Boy or anybody on DCD2. He's like, oh, the homies, like check this out. It's like so amazing, and it's like not good.
It's so not genuine at all, because I respect artists who will actually promote stuff that's not on their label.
That they actually care about, though. And he's just, it looks like he's getting slipped some money money to like just press the tweet button.
Hey Pete, you've got like what 1.5 mil Twitter followers and however many Instagram followers. Yo, how about we slip you a few $100 and you just go ahead and tweet out Lolo's new song or Max or whoever featuring this new politics featuring Max or however many collaborations we can get on one song. Let's just tweet the fuck out of this and say it's the best thing ever, even though it's not.
And I also think another thing, like, I can almost call this Pete Wentz syndrome, is when this All Time Low totally copied what Pete always does. Anytime Fall Out Boy release a song, a music video, an album announcement, at least lately in their last 2 album cycles, he writes this long-ass letter of how genuine and important and special it was. Alex did the same exact thing about the announcement of their album, and it's like, this is just a little too close here, and it's just so not genuine. Like, honestly, you're telling me this is that huge and groundbreaking? Doubt it.
To me, it seems like the label will sit them down like almost with a homework assignment and say, all right guys, before we announce your new album, The Last Young Renegade, I'm gonna need on my desk by tomorrow,
your essay.
I'm gonna need your essay about why this album is so awesome. But it's just a regular pop album. I don't know what to say about it. Well, just make up some bullshit and just put it on your Instagram officially tomorrow.
And it's so funny because I can't remember exactly what Alex said. I was skimming through his post, but it was the same kind of bullshit. And I feel like even with the lyricism, like as these albums go in their discography, it gets dumber and dumber. Like they're not as great.
Right, and you would think a lot of bands, especially in older times, would mature up until I would say, like, I think it started really turning backwards around maybe the late 2000s, early 2010s.
Yeah, I agree.
And you really just hit this point where labels were like, oh, wow, rock bands aren't as profitable or something.
And they just want, like, a catchy, easy, memorable chorus that doesn't really mean anything. And as opposed to, like, think about, like, we were talking about Infinity on High. Albums like that had such deep, like, lyricism that had such meaning to it.
And I wouldn't have had a problem if they had written a long post like that, because I would have read that and then it would have been true. Right, it would have been true.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, wow, okay, I can definitely see where you were talking about this. Or on Folie à Deux, if they had written a long statement
Especially
about how... Yeah, if they'd written a long statement about how, wow, this album is much less personal, we're writing from other points of view. I get it. But if you're trying to sell me on American Beauty, American Psycho as some epic shit, then you're on some shit. Because
that's like their least genuine album, I feel like.
Really, it's just a bunch of, like, sure, it's catchy for the most part, but there's not substance. And what do you think about this kind of ties into some of the other bands, getting back to some of the other bands that have been kind of changing their sound. We were talking about Weezer before. They've got a new single out. Feels Like Summer is the name of the track, and I like it.
I do like the song.
But at the same time, I would say maybe it has a little bit more of, like, the Weezer flair to it, just because the lyrical content is more like
I feel like with Weezer, most of their songs still have, like, the lyrics for them, and I can forgive them. Not that I'm, like, annoyed at this song or whatever. I know a lot of fans, I guess, didn't like it as much, but I can see, like, people need to kind of take a step back, because I feel like if you look at their last album they released, that was, like, gold to me. Like, that should have won the Grammy.
Oh, yeah, for the alternative album. So they were snubbed big time.
It's not like they've been going on like this for years or something, but, like, it's just one song. Like, you don't know what the rest is going to sound like.
Right, and obviously Weezer have a tendency to be very experimental. If you look into their discography whatsoever, I mean, they've got some whack albums that I don't like as much, but at the same time, Weezer is Weezer, and it's nothing new. Now, for some of these other bands that I've got here in front of me, like, for example, Linkin Park, which have changed up drastically. It
doesn't even sound like the same band, that one song.
Oh, Heavy. Yeah, Heavy does not. And even some of the other ones, like Battle Symphony, that we've seen released from the album so far, it's just, it's a different band almost, or else it's almost like a duo or a solo project of Chester Bennington, the lead singer from Linkin Park, or something like that.
It's again with the band members, like, kind of being pushed to the back and not using their instruments.
And it's like, what do you do live in that setting?
That's what I mean. Like, it takes away a lot from the live show.
Right, like imagine going to see Dirty Laundry or else Heavy
That's
live.
why I'm so surprised that was the lead single, because, like, I don't want to hear that live. Like, I feel like it'd be so boring.
Right, or even, I'm just imagining Heavy because it's mainly just beat-centric, and, I mean, like...
They're just gonna press play on a laptop.
On a loop or something, like they've got Ableton or GarageBand up in the background and they're just pressing a loop.
And I think you said something a couple weeks ago about Linkin Park and how Of Mice and Men and Sum 41 have sounded more like them
than they actually
themselves.
have. And that's really, really strange that
It's
you've got
weird.
bands out there actually nailing your sound, emulating that better than you are in 2017.
It's weird.
And I don't want to be that person that's like, oh, the band can't do what they want to do. But as so many people have pointed out, and obviously fans are angry by this as well, it's the fact that obviously the fans don't really seem to be connecting with it, and it's like you can evolve, but don't devolve. Like we talked about,
Yeah.
let's not go backwards.
I feel like most of this content that these bands are putting out, like, it doesn't mean that they're all bad or horrible, but they're not memorable. They're not stuff that's gonna, like, you're gonna listen to years and years from now and say that was the best song, you know?
The worst part for me is the fact that I know that they're just trying to sell us on something.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like, it's got the grabby single, it's a 10-song album pretty much every time because the label's like, you know, people's attention spans are short as hell, so we can't put out more than 10 songs. Oh, you've got 15 songs written? I don't care. And that's another point that I wanted to bring up. Just recently, there's an artist that I like, pretty popular, John Mayer. Most of you guys probably at least have heard the name. And he talked about how, I know that a label could have been involved with this before I say it. I know I criticized him on Twitter for this, but obviously a lot of that criticism is going towards the label as well, I would say. But he talked about how he had so many waves of music that he wanted to release, and he had so much more than a traditional album, so he decided to release The Search for Everything, his new album, in waves, or else like 4 songs at a time, and he thought that there were going to be a lot of waves and that sort of thing. And then he starts teasing on his Twitter, well, the final chapter is already coming. He released 2 waves. I guess it wasn't working out as well as the label wanted it to. They started panicking. They were like, John, you got to cut this down, dude, or something. And he originally, he says 16 songs. There's going to be 16 songs on the album. Then, a week later, it's like 14. I got 14 songs coming on the album. Then, the other night, he posts the final track listing. I see this on Twitter, and it's down to 12 songs. And everyone is just kind of like sitting there like, dude, you said you had way too much music for one studio album. You couldn't do a traditional album.
Cutting everything.
And what is 12 songs? It's a traditional album, and in fact, for John Mayer, it's kind of a short album. A lot of his are like 14, 15. So it's just another one of those things where I feel like the label is tying the hands, and they're so desperate these days.
I also wanted to talk about, like, the release of singles. Like, lately, a lot of bands release single after single after single, and, like, it just kind of takes away from the excitement of, like, hearing the album.
Right. If you've got 7 songs out of 10 before an album drops, then
it's like, you know,
then what's the point? You know?
Yeah, and I know a band that's actually on Filled by Ramen Vinyl Theater. They were pushed back, I think, their release for their album. Like, they were told it was going to come out, I think...
Last year, wasn't it?
I don't know, but, like, they've been working on it forever, and then I think they were given, like, a different date, and now it's been pushed back to May, but they ended up releasing 4 singles, like, all at once.
Just because it had been so long.
Yeah, I feel like they just wanted to get something out there, but obviously that's not the route that they would have preferred to take. It's because of the label pushing it back so many times that they're just like, okay, we want to get music out, so they really have no choice.
We have to. They essentially
sucks.
They essentially dropped an EP all at once, but with them, that's another thing that I don't like about Fueled by Rama is that they cater to certain bands on the label and they ignore others.
Yes, exactly.
Like the Hush sound got ignored on that label for years. I feel like the front bottoms don't get that much attention.
Yeah,
from the
I always
label.
forget that they're even on there.
I didn't even know until a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then obviously you've got some more inactive artists like Gym Class Heroes and Fun that nobody's really going to be talking about. But even then, I feel like after Fun started getting a little bit less popular, they just instantly just like cut the promotion for
Yeah,
them.
it's because like they had those couple big songs a couple years ago, and then now what?
After that, nothing. Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, they put out like 1 track since then, and it was just a live version
Now I
of the
feel
song.
like it's kind of just been taken over by like 21 Pilots and
right,
you know, that's
exactly.
probably definitely their biggest band.
I think Fueled by and other labels like that, I don't mean to just call them out. There's other bands like Rise Records, I can't even think of any others off the top of my head, but there's a good handful of records that have either dropped a lot of their artists in exchange for a lot of others, and I think everybody is just so concerned about marketability and having some sort of edge to
like
them so that they can develop a rabid fan base of some sort so that they can in return profit off of that.
Get clicks.
Because,
you know.
I mean, look at Basement. Are they going to have a crazy screaming fan base?
No, they're not that type of band.
But they want them to. That's the thing.
I hope that doesn't happen.
They want to turn them into that because I feel like everything these days, if they're not everything these days is, as most of us know, is unfortunately drowned in like R&B hip hop influences.
Yeah.
And I hate that. Either that or else just an overwhelming amount of electronics or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why. I mean, like, I like hip hop and I like electronic, but I also like rock, and
It doesn't always work with rock.
Right,
too.
and I want to go to listen to something if I'm going to listen to rock.
If
you know?
like a band for their rock music, you don't want to go listen to them like do a hip hop song.
Exactly. Like, if I want to do that, like, what's the difference between, I want to maybe one day listen to Eminem, Outkast, and Jay-Z. That's one thing. And then I want to come back the next day and maybe listen to a couple of different rock bands. Maybe I want to listen to Green Day, 3 Days Grace, and Car Seat Headrest, for example. What if Car Seat Headrest went hip-hop? Exactly. But the thing is, some label would probably be like, you know what? You've got a pretty good fan base brewing there. I think Car Seat Headrest needs to do a track with Rick Ross.
Just no. I feel like also even 21 Pilots, like when they're on the Suicide Squad, like all that, just kind of being associated with all those artists, like they're kind of falling off for me in terms of like the fan base and whatnot. Right. But it just happens so often now, and it sucks to see a lot of our favorite bands kind of go that way. You know,
what would you like to see, like, in the future, like, from labels and, like, the bands and that sort of thing, in terms of, like, promotion and getting themselves out there?
I just kind of wish it was, like, how it used to be, I guess. You know, more, like, about the band, like, the band doing what they want to do, not, you know, a marketing team, like,
and then maybe the label actually supporting them and believing in the idea.
Yeah, and not, like, you know, putting their foot down saying, no, you can't do this, like, no, you're going to wait until this time to release your album.
No, it's
like,
only going to be 10 songs.
Which is why I like a lot of the smaller labels that are out there, like Run for Cover, I think is a really great label for like smaller type bands that I like a lot of majority of the bands on those labels and stuff,
right.
like Modern Baseball and Turnover and those.
Right.
I just think that they let them do more of what they want.
Right, and at the same time, it's I wish that more labels, the bigger labels, had that mentality because... Yeah. You know, like we've already mentioned, I hate to harp on this, but at the same time it needs to be said that labels have changed so much in the past 10 years, and it's just like everybody bows down to one thing. Everybody bows down to the almighty dollar these days because money isn't, in the music industry at least, is not... you know, as easy to find as it was.
It's because
10,
people aren't just
ago.
going out and buying CDs anymore. It's like iTunes, but even iTunes.
iTunes
like people,
is dead,
you
almost.
can go on, now bands are starting to, you know, use YouTube to upload, most bands now, like labels, just upload
right.
their album right before it comes out or on the day it comes out.
Even the new Ed Sheeran album was uploaded to YouTube the day of.
Yeah, like, it's like the new thing. I remember that was, like, unheard of years and years ago. Like, you could never find a whole album. And now
exactly.
that's, like, one of the first places they go.
And obviously Spotify, Apple Music,
yeah,
Deezer,
there's so many different
services.
ways around it, but they're still making money.
But much less. They're making
and that's why they're trying
pennies
to pull
dollar.
more. And I understand that, but it's just like it can be way too much.
It's just like
in this
it's
year.
like clickbaiting on YouTube.
It is.
You know, you know, people are trying to get those extra views. They're trying to develop something, and I get that money has to be out there, but at the same time, maybe we just need to cut down on the amount of bands. Instead of trying to sign 40 different bands to your label, maybe hone like 15, 20
just
really
put
good
more
ones.
effort into the ones you have.
Right, instead of signing them and then just not paying any attention to them, because maybe they'd be better suited, because I think there's enough small labels out there to sign up the majority of the really talented bands out there.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
I agree.
like you said, Run for Cover, Sumerian, there's a lot of good small record labels out there that do a lot of great things with the bands that they have. But some of the big ones need to look back and see, where were we 15 years ago? How would we have promoted something then versus now? And obviously you can factor in the internet for changes. You can think about how to do things on social media, but nothing really just seems to be creative these days. Everything now, it's just like, oh, well, what are we going to do to build a hype? We'll just post these really weird teasers that have nothing to do with anything.
That like do like the blackouts on their whole social media.
Or else they'll post 17 Instagram photos to make this huge collage thing. Oh, and guess what? Instagram doesn't put things in your feed in order anymore, so that's a fucking nightmare. It just looks like
horrible. It was horrible before, but it's just so they can get an image on their profile.
Right, and guess what? They ruin it like 3 days later the next time they post a picture.
Exactly, it's gonna keep messing up. Right. I don't see that. But I also wanted to mention alternative press. I think earlier today you and I were on there, or I was on there, I saw something that they posted, and it was about Warped Tour lineup being leaked, and like I feel like they're kind of doing a lot of the same that like these labels do, like just the clickbait, you know, click on this, like, oh, this band's doing huge things, and it's like something we already knew about, or something.
Flex emoji,
So
fist pound emoji,
like, look at this,
hands praise emoji.
Yeah, look at this fan of this band wearing this shirt. Like, that's your whole news story right there.
It's like some dude was spotted in a Paris shirt. Wow! Oh my god, and he did something completely unrelated to music. Who would have guessed?
They overhype it, just like these bands and labels do. Like, I know the bands, like, aren't tweeting from their own band account. Like, it's
more often
somebody
than not.
else.
Like Patrick Stump's not tweeting out his Batman things that he was featured on. That was not, I mean, like, obviously Patrick hasn't tweeted in years.
Yeah, so that's been going on, like, all across social media.
Right, and did you see the Alt Press article where they posted the link to the New Politics thing? I think it was on their Facebook, and they shared it out. I don't even follow their page, but I think somebody had liked it or something, and it showed up in my feed, and it was like, New Politics song, the new Politics song is Pete Wentz approved, and it's like...
Oh, yeah, I did send that to you.
It's like...
It's like, okay, why does that make it good? That makes it, like, worthy?
But here's the thing. It circles back to what we were talking about. Pete Wentz owns DCD2. Of course he fucking approves it, you morons.
He's, like, one of the people that signed them.
Exactly. So you think he's not gonna just push the fuck and try to sell out of whatever
Exactly.
he is? And like, that's another thing, like you said, with the whole Pete Wentz syndrome thing. I respect Pete a whole lot as a songwriter and stuff, but he is money hungry beyond belief.
It's a shame.
I mean, he even said at one point that he wasn't interested in making any kind of music anymore that couldn't get played on the radio.
Yeah, you told me that recently. Like, that bums me out for their next album whenever that's happening.
Right, and I heard Joe Troman, the guitarist of Fall Out Boy, even spewing some bullshit whenever he said in a Sirius XM interview with somebody saying, well, we're one of the only bands that get played on the radio, and we're the only ones that have, like, we're one of the only ones that actually have guitars.
Okay.
And we're trying to, no, he said, and we're trying to turn them up louder every single record. Bullshit!
Oh, that's a complete lie. I was gonna say, like, the only song that they've had on the radio that really had a lot of guitars was Uma Thurman.
And that was a sample.
Yeah, exactly.
The majority of that was the Monsters theme song. It wasn't
even their written stuff, and if he's saying that they're trying to do more
with
rock,
guitars?
more guitar, like, that's such a lie. Like, listen to every one of their albums in order.
Right.
It gets less and less.
But the drop from Foley amount of guitars to Save Rock and Roll...
Even Save Rock and Roll, I feel like, was a lot better than...
Save Rock and Roll, then you go into American Beauty, it's just like... You're telling me that you turned up the guitars louder every time, but they've gotten quieter and buried more in the mix the past two records.
That's exactly, yeah.
I don't know. So, a lot of things have changed. A lot of things with labels need to improve, or else I'm just going to get to the point where I'm just so irritated and agitated that maybe I'm just going to have to get off of social media. But
yeah, you've done that several times in the last 2 months.
I've had to take several breaks, whether it's just me getting on and maybe I'll just tweet and not look at anything else. Yeah. But it's just... Sometimes it's overwhelming.
It's too much.
Just because everybody tries to hype up everything to be just so big. Yeah. Or, somebody... I mean, like, I get that you're trying... that you believe in your thing or your project and you want it to sell or you want people to stream it or whatever. But at the same time, it's just... I think that people... also connect with down-to-earth, like, people who are real with them.
Exactly, that's why I connect with, like, smaller bands, like I mentioned before, that their Twitter accounts have, like, 10,000 or something. Like, a lot of the, like Pacific, they actually run their pages. I know they're still small, but it's still something that I can connect with more, and I can kind of respect them more for being like that. Even Turnover, they're pretty big on Twitter, I feel like now. Like, not huge, but compared to a lot of other smaller bands, like, they still tweet everything, post everything themselves. They don't try to be, like, this big, band that's out there above everybody.
And I don't want to come off like we're saying, like, oh, we don't want bands to get big.
No.
Or anything like that.
It's just, like, don't lose your genuine...
like
the way
presence that you had. And I have to shout out somebody real quick who has a big Twitter presence. I think he's got at least 500,000 followers. Hoodie Allen.
Oh yeah, he's still completely genuine.
Yeah, completely independent.
Meets fans.
I've met him a couple of times, and he will even occasionally DM me. He runs everything himself. He's a big artist. He's had multiple top 10 mixtapes and EPs and albums.
They
but
act like they're humans, you know. They don't.
Right.
They don't put themselves on this pedestal like they're like the greatest thing that ever came to be.
And I think if more bands would pick up a mentality like that, because Hoodie's seen his time in the spotlight. He toured with Wiz Khalifa and Fall Out Boy,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's not like he came away from that experience and said, "Wow, I need to sign to a label."
Because he
and I
doesn't
need
care
to...
about that. He does it because he likes it and enjoys it. It's not about money.
Right.
And about being famous.
Right. I have to. I know it's a couple of rappers right there, and that not everyone's into rap music, but Hoodie Allen and Chance the Rapper both. I really respect both of them, even though I don't love all of Chance's music, and I've yet to check it all out. I really respect that he's completely independent. He won a Grammy, which said a lot. And he had a song, his song No Problem was all about essentially telling labels to fuck off and leave him alone.
Awesome.
But right after that, he had a $10 million record deal offered to him. And he was like, did you hear what my song was about? And
Oh my gosh.
And he's more concerned about issues like, the inner city children in his community and
That's
stuff
good,
like that,
yeah.
which it really is something that I respect. And he's also involved in a lot of other things. So people like that are doing things right. They're not full of themselves. They're not overselling
Exactly.
what they're doing. So bands, artists, rappers, whoever you are in the future, maybe take notes. That's our take on the situation, guys. We hope that you really enjoyed this comeback episode of Not a Podcast. Hannah, thanks for coming on as co-host.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be back.
Yeah, no, she will be. No, that's the future format pretty much going forward. It's pretty much probably going to be with Hannah most episodes. We're going to try to get some guests and that sort of thing. If you guys have any suggestions, obviously we can't pull anybody too huge, but we have a few people in mind that we think you might enjoy in the music community. A couple of others that we've thought of recently that are a little bit bigger, but we actually have access to that we will try to pull on the podcast for you guys. But other than that, we do hope that you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out Hannah's channel and her Twitter account. I'll link them both in the description down below. Let us know what you thought of our podcast and on any of the points that we made. And other than that, you can see the last episode of the podcast by clicking right below me, another recent Beyond ARTV video, or else Hannah's channel floating in little annotations right here, social media in the description, and we'll see you very soon right here on Not a Podcast on Beyond ARTV.